And folks, as promised, we're going to continue the conversation about movies, particularly as they relate to Chicago. And when I want to talk pop culture in general, but specifically movies, I always love to have on the show my friend and the friend of the Steve Cortes Show, Jacob Airy. He is the head of StudioJake Media, and he is a critic of faith, pop culture, and more. Joins us from sunny Los Angeles, California. Jacob, my daughter goes to school in Los Angeles, and she's been kind of taunting me lately because, of course, it's January in Chicago, and it seems like the weather's been pretty terrific your way lately.
Yes, it has been nice.
Yeah, wonderful. Good. Hey, I'm glad. Now, before we get to the movies, let me just ask you, because you clearly have a conservative mindset, and yet you work in the Hollywood industry broadly, and we just had a fascinating conversation with Christy Swanson, and she says that she thinks, she said she never thought so necessarily at the time that perhaps her political views were costing her politically. She's like, but now that there's this explosion of cancel culture in the United States, not just Hollywood, but all over the place, unfortunately, in Main Street, she's like, when I look back, it seems apparent that, I probably was penalized professionally for those kinds of views. Have you, as somebody who writes about as a critic of media, have you suffered that, do you think? Do you think it's more difficult for you to be professionally successful given that you have a conservative and Christian mindset in that industry?
Oh, yes, definitely. In fact, just the other day, there is this, I won't say the name of the company because I still work with them, but I was contacted by a company that helps me get interviews and whatnot, and they said, hey, listen, we can't send you any more people to interview because you're active on Parler. And I said, well, I have to diversify. That's how you make it nowadays. You have to be all over the place on social media. And they said, well, we're sorry, we can't. Most of our clients don't want to talk to people who are on Parler.
Wow.
And I said, well, how about so I offered them a compromise because they've been good to me. And I said, well, how about I just don't mention I have a Parler when I speak to them. Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, well, that should probably be okay. And of course now it's a moot point until the Parler lawsuit with Amazon gets resolved. But I've definitely personally have felt the impact of cancel culture. And I don't even work for a major studio. I'm an indie person.
Right.
So
wow.
I have felt that sort of impact.
And Jacob, that's fascinating too. I mean, just the fact that you're even on there, right? Not saying, hey, you post stuff that's offensive or, you post something that's inappropriate. Just, no, you're on a platform, right? That happens to believe.
And it's true. I use it to post my YouTube videos, my film commentary from my website. That's what I was using it for. And up until its collapse, recent collapse, I was making headway on it. And for a company to say, hey, well, we worked for you for about 2 years now, our clients don't want to work with you if you're on there. I find that kind of, I want to say schoolmarmy is the right word, but it is out and out censorship.
Right. No, I think it's disappointing to say the least. I'd say even scary would be a correct adjective to describe
yes.
that situation. But okay, on a much better note, as I mentioned, Christy Swanson did nail it live, but let's play again. Simone from Ferris Bueller. Here she is.
Bueller?
He's sick. My best friend's sister's boyfriend's brother's girlfriend heard from this guy who knows this kid is going with the girl who saw Ferris pass out at 31 Flavors last night. I guess it's pretty serious.
Thank you, Simone.
And of course, that's Ben Stein. So both of them became pretty well known after those. In the scheme of the movie, they're not consequential roles, but I think the two of them, compared to a relatively short amount of script, the two of them both became very well known for their respective reactions. So, top 5 Chicago movies of all time. I put it now. I'm not the pro, you are, but I'm going to give my list, and then we can go through it and critique it, and you can tell me where I'm wrong since you're the pro. I said that Ferris Bueller comes in at number 3 of all time. So from the top, though, I say Home Alone, number 1. Number 2, Blues Brothers. Then, as I mentioned, Ferris Bueller, number 3, all-time Chicago movies. Number 4, The Fugitive. And then number 5 for me is Brian's Song. Now, first, why don't you first give your top 5, and then we can go through them one by one.
So my top five, I actually am in line with a few of your picks. I just swap out two. So my number five would be Code of Silence, which is a Chuck Norris action movie about a Chicago cop who breaks up a drug deal. It's very, very fun adventure movie, great escapism. Number four for me would be Uncle Buck with the great John Candy. Love that movie. Laugh all the way through it. Number three would also be The Fugitive. Harrison Ford is fantastic in that film. It's got a lot of great cameos, and of course Tommy Lee Jones. Number two is Home Alone. I love that movie ever since I was a kid. I still can watch it and get tons of laughs from it. And then my number one is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I have loved that movie. My dad, it has kind of a special memory. It was a father-son favorite when I was growing up. I used to watch it with my dad. So that's just one of my all-time favorite movies. And I actually think it is one of the few movies in the 80s that actually got teenagers, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right. Well, and certainly, if there's anybody who did, it was John Hughes, right? I mean, who just,
Yeah, for sure.
and as Chicagoans, we're just so blessed that as a Chicagoan, he chose to set his stories here and film a heck of a lot of them actually here, as well. So all right, so let's start with Home Alone. Even though you had a number two, I had a number one, but pretty close. By the way, you and I talked before Christmas, and I think I asked you to rank Christmas movies, and I think I put something else as number one. I will tell you, after this Christmas season, and after we watched Home Alone a few times, the Cortes family did, and my kids absolutely love, and my kids aren't little anymore, they're teenagers and grown, I mean high school and college, but my kids just absolutely love Home Alone, and I have to say, now that I've watched it again several times, it's not only my number one Chicago movie, it's also my number one Christmas movie. I mean, it's just an absolutely delightful film because to me, it's got a bit of everything. It's got crazy slapstick, right? It's got a little bit of suspense. I mean, you are nervous about what's going to happen in this movie, even though it's funny. And then also, besides the comedy, a truly endearing story. I mean, it really is at its crux a great family story. And then on top of all of that, the Christmas aspect to it, which I think just makes it extra special. What is it about Home Alone? I mean, what do you see in it, though? That's just my totally amateur view. What do you see in it as a critic, as a pro in this field that makes that, to you, the number two Chicago movie of all time?
Well, I think one of the things that it is really good is it juggles a lot, right? You've got the family who leaves the kid. It shows what the mother is doing to try to get back to him as a subplot. And, of course, again, John Candy, he has a great cameo in that storyline. But also you kind of get to see like a little boy trying to be an adult for a few days, right? He's defending his home, he's making his own meals, he's going grocery shopping, and he kind of gets to learn what it's like for his parents. And so in that perspective, I think that's why just those timeless kind of themes of family and learning to live with them, and maybe they're not as bad as you think, that whole kind of thing, when you're a kid and you kind of put a lot of pressure on your parents. And so you as a dad, and me as a son, I know put a lot of pressure on my mom and dad growing up. Right.
No, you're right. They captured
I
it
think
well
that's why.
in the film. All right, listen, we're going to continue the conversation on great Chicago movies with Jacob Berry up next. And we are back talking about the best Chicago movies of all time. And I've got a friend of the show and media critic Jacob Berry on to help us break all these down. And he and I both agree that Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Home Alone are two of the greatest Chicago films of all time. Jacob, before we get back to the movies, for the audience out there that wants to follow your work, which I think is always excellent, where should they go to learn about you and what you do?
You can find most of my commentary on my website at StudioJakeMedia.com. I've got film reviews, TV reviews, whatever you want pretty much. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Real Jacob Berry. My YouTube channel and my Rumble are both the same at Studio Jake. So just head over to those places. You can find my retrospective, my reviews, my recommendations, and whatever else.
Okay, great. Now, one we did not see eye to eye on is I included, now granted, I put it at number 5, so it barely made my list, but I put Brian's song on there. Now, admittedly, I'm an absolute Chicago Bears fanatic, so I'm very biased, and perhaps that's part of why. Perhaps I'm giving that, more of a glow to the movie than I should. But first of all, I think it's two amazing actors who were at the time very, very young, James Caan and Billy D. Williams. And I'm talking about the original one, the original Brian song. I actually never saw the remake because to me, I couldn't. I will also tell you funny just stories as an aside. When the Bears made the Super Bowl, which is now 14 years ago, and my older kids were very young, I said before that Super Bowl, I was like, you've got to watch Brian's song. And so I went and got it. I think bought the DVD, which is what we did in those days, and watched it. And I was an absolute bumbling mess, crying my eyes out, could not get through Brian's song. I'm going to play a quick clip, probably the most famous clip of Brian's song.
I love Brian Piccolo, and I'd like all of you to love him too.
Now, it didn't make your list. Is there anything negative about it, or just didn't quite make the cut for you? Because I have heard criticisms that it's a bit too saccharine, that it tugs at the heartstrings in a way that is sort of too obvious. Your thoughts?
Well, it didn't make my list as top Chicago films because I see it more as a drama. I actually disagree. I think it's a fantastic movie.
Okay.
I think it was Phil Hartman who said, "You're a robot if you don't cry after Brian's song."
Right.
That's how I feel about it. I just don't. I know even though it surrounds the Chicago Bears, obviously, I just see it more as a buddy film, as
Sure.
a drama
It's
film,
more of a human
and so that's
story.
why.
Yeah,
That's why, basically.
And that is a
I
good
see it in
point.
that range.
And now that I think of it too, like I don't think even very much filming in Chicago. I mean, so yeah, they play for the Bears, but it's not. That is a valid point. It doesn't have any. Whereas, say Ferris Bueller, I mean, Chicago is absolutely like just critical to the movie, right? You know what I mean? And the scene,
Right, exactly.
the scenery of it, and all of that. So yeah, that's a solid point. Interesting because you cited John Candy, and he makes your list twice. Also makes an Uncle Buck. I will admit, I don't think I've seen Uncle Buck since it came out, so I can't speak intelligently about it. But what is it about Uncle Buck that caused you to put it in the top 5 Chicago movies ever?
I would say because it's a fish out of water movie, right? Uncle Buck, he's not actually from Chicago, right? So he kind of invades his teenage niece and nephew's lives with his sort of clumsy way, and of course his niece gets jilted by her boyfriend, and he gets revenge on him, and so that's why I say that you kind of have that Chicago suburban feel, and then you have this invader played by John Candy as the uncle, right? And that's why I just think that it really shows that family upheaval, just living in sort of that suburban Chicago life, and how he just kind of wrecks it, comes in like a wrecking ball, almost quite literally into their lives. But that's why I like it. Hilarious comedy. Very well written.
Okay. And then last one, and we've got under a minute here, Jacob, but I have not seen Code of Silence. So please tell me and the audience why I should.
It is a great '80s Chuck Norris film. It's it's when he was at the peak of his movie career. It's got all the martial arts action you could want. It's got explosions and just pretty much everything in between. It's a perfect escapist movie. You can just relax, grab some popcorn, and just enjoy it for a good solid. I think it's like an hour and 45 minutes.
Okay.
And just to get away, it's just perfect for that.
Sounds good for a cold weekend coming up, especially for me, given that football is just about done. I will have to watch Code of Silence. Jacob Berry, thank you so much for being our guest today.